Kokota is a tiny islet in the Zanzibar archipelago off the coast of Tanzania in East Africa. For centuries, Kokotans have prospered by making a living off the land and sea. It is not the kind of place you'd expect to find people innovatively adapting to climate change. But that's exactly what they're doing. Life here hinges on solving huge problems. Things like deforestation, water shortages, and a collapsing fishery. Climate change is making all of their problems even worse. And Kokotans' survival depends upon their ability to adapt.
Mwanzo nilipokuja tu watoto, niona maisha mazuri tu. Hapo kwa huyo mshipi kuna tu hapo tayari kunavuta samaki. Ya kulima, niseme nilime kama hapa, nifike kama pale njiani pale. Basi hapa tavuna vitu vingi sana.
Hali ya tupoja kuwa mdogo na sasa ni tofauti. Lakini sasa kutakwenda kwa kutwa nzima kunarudi mikono mitupu, bahari haina kitu kavu. Ni zamani ulikuwa ukalima hapa pori kubwa sana, tukunakata kwa mindu ile, mapanga yale, mshoka. Lakini sasa kuna msitu namna hiyo. Wa kukata kwa panga, kwa kukata shoka.
We can start to get a feeling of how disastrous global deforestation would be by looking at Kokota. Without a tree canopy, ground temperatures skyrocketed. Soils couldn't retain moisture, and without the grip of a dense network of tree roots, they quickly turned into dust. Baruch Musa Omar is from the neighboring island of Pemba. When he visited Kokota for the first time, the islet was teetering towards collapse.
Mara yangu ya mwanzo nilipofika Kokota, kwamba licha kwamba watu ni maskini sana, hakuna shule, hapana dispensary, hakuna umeme, hakuna maji. Nilitaka nisaidie, lakini nitafanyaje? Mimi maskini, sikuwa na uwezo wowote ambao kiasi fulani naweza nikawasaidia watu wa Kokota.
Baruch realized that his island, Pemba, was headed in the exact same direction as Kokota.
Sasa joto likiongezeka, ina maana nalo vyanzo vingi vya maji vinapotea. Lakini sasa hivi mito yote inapita maji, pengine iko hivi au iko hivi, ndio sana ni. Kwa sababu kama ina maana kwamba kuwepo kwa miti, ina maana kama labda ndio nyumba yake yale maji. Kwa sababu tunapokuwa tunajila wenyewe, ardhi inabakia ardhi halia, na miti inapoendelea kupotea.
Baruch thought that if he could figure out how to get trees in the ground in Pemba, that he might be able to do the same for Kokota. Baruch also knew he couldn't tackle island-wide reforestation alone. So he recruited Jeff Schnurr, a 21-year-old Canadian tree planter.
I came to Pemba 7 years ago now, and I was just living here. I was trying to write a novel at the time. Didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. And Baruch kind of heard that I was a tree planter, came, and we spent several long evenings just discussing, what tree planting could look like here in Pemba. It was all fairly amateur. We didn't have a lot of the expertise, but we had a lot of drive and motivation. And that first year, we were able to grow 100,000 seedlings. It was an operation run on a smile and a handshake. And we started getting support. The Finnish embassy supported us, and then the European Union did. And that really helped us take it to the next level.
Baruch and Jeff were the perfect team. While Jeff concentrated on international fundraising efforts, Baruch could focus on managing things on the ground. He immediately headed back to Kokota.
Sasa nyinyi jambo gani ambalo mnahitaji sisi tuweze kuwasaidia la mwanzo la muhimu? Wao wakasema bwana, sisi tatizo letu la mwanzo tunachohitaji sisi ni maji.
Shughuli mbadala tunazofanya kwa kusave yale maji tulionayo. Kiufupi, maji ni kwamba yanatumika kwa masuala ya kupikia, lakini sasa katika shughuli nyingi sana ni kwamba tunatumia maji chumvi. Kama kuoshea vyombo, hata maji ya kijaju ndio utaona mwenyewe watoto wanachezea chumvi, wanaogelea, ndio wanaoga kabisa vile. Pengine tangi ya lita 20 kwamba itumike kwa siku 2. Matano inakuwa sasa ile kunywa tu basi kwa siku lita 20 inakuwa zinamaliza.
Na hata ukichimba kwenye ardhi ya Kokota basi unapata salt water. Lakini ukweli ni kwamba watu wa Kokota walikuwa wanasafa zaidi ya masaa 15. Wao waache shughuli zao za kimaendeleo. Hiyo yani ilikuwa ni kazi mahususi. Mradi wetu tulionao sisi ni kutokana na rainwater harvesting, uvunaji wa maji ya mvua. Tutapata wapi hicho chanzo cha kuvuna maji ya mvua? Nyumba walizonavyo ni vibanda tu, vibanda vya makuti, yani vibovu.
Baruch's idea was to build Kokota's very first school and use the roof to collect rainwater. Kokotans worked round the clock for months to complete the water tank and the school. And in March 2012, Kokotans were finally able to turn on a tap.
Kwa kweli ilikuwa kama ni dream, kiasi ambacho watu hakuamini. Ilikuwa magi sijui ni hadithi nisimulie vipi, lakini kama kitu ambacho kama ndoto, leo matokeo yake yamekuwa kweli. Unajua, mpaka kesho kuanzisha nasari Kokota na Uvinje ni tatizo kubwa, na tatizo kubwa linalokuja ni suala la maji.
To help Kokotans conserve their precious water, a group of women in Pemba volunteered to grow thousands of seedlings in their own nursery to establish a new forest in Kokota.
Naweza kusema eneo ambalo limetengwa kwa ajili ya uhifadhi wa misitu ni karibu ya asilimia 40 ya kisiwa cha Kokota. Naweza kusema hadi hapa tulipo ni karibu miaka mitatu.
Na hizi ndogo ndogo mitatu, lakini kwa mpangilio ambao utasaidia kwamba ukiondoka huu mwingine unaweza kuzaa.
It was economic development on one side. Communities were planting trees for fruit, timber to make a living. But the end result was an area that was now covered in trees. Yes, you could harvest some trees, and you still had a forest. Conservation was a day job. Our model is that economic development is directly opposed to environmental conservation. We can't conserve the natural world because we need jobs. Yes, we need to fight climate change, but look at the cost. We can't afford to do that, we're in a recession. That's a completely ludicrous way of thinking, and Pemben showed us that. Economic development and environmental conservation are not opposed, they're actually intertwined.
In addition to their reforestation efforts, Kokotans have completely revamped their approach to farming and are now using renewable energy to charge portable household batteries, proving that adapting to climate change doesn't have to lead to a less comfortable lifestyle.
Kama tumeshaharibu, sasa wajibu wetu tutengeneze. Na Kokota na wao sasa hivi wenye wao wanataka waendelee kuhifadhi eneo la baharini. Na sasa hivi wamo katika mpango mkubwa sana wa kuachana na matumizi makubwa ya kuni. Wanatumia kwa mfano majiko ambayo unatumia kuni moja au kuni mbili kwa ajili ya kupikia. Kwa hiyo huu ni mfano mzuri sana. Ni mfano mzuri wa kuigwa kiasi ambacho pahala popote katika dunia, basi na wao kama wataamua washaharibu.
When you look at the whole planet, you can get overwhelmed. And you realize, looking at Kokota, that that's the planet. We're good at taking Mother Nature and using it to support us. We're good at growing. But there's a limit. It's not even about sacrifice. It's about changing and shifting our way of thinking. Pick the smallest problem you can solve. We didn't plant 1.3 million trees overnight. It was one seed at a time at first. One community at a time. It was actually a small problem because it wasn't on the Pemben scale or the global scale. It was just a couple of people with an idea and a hope that they could actually do it.
Lovely starshine lights my way to bed. Magic rainbows glisten in my head. Just like a child, I live in Wonderland. All my dreams are coming true. Heavy shackles used to hold me down. Now my feet don't even reach the ground. Just like a prisoner when his sentence ends. All my dreams are coming true. All my dreams are coming true.
It was very briefly mentioned in the film here, but we've continued to do this work and build on these successes. And a great example would be something like agroforestry. So it's helping communities and farmers in rural Tanzania and Zanzibar in particular transition from subsistence agriculture, monoculture agriculture, to growing these diverse food forests. And they're making more money at doing that, and we know that every dollar earned in income for communities is that they're that much more resilient to changes in climate change, but also when a pandemic strikes. So these systems like agroforestry systems, not only are they more diverse and better for climate change, better for drought and extreme weather, but they're also improving incomes. And that's, I think, core to how we work with communities, and core to this story is how do we take that livelihood approach to make sure that we're bringing people out of poverty, but also making them more resilient to climate change. So yeah,
absolutely. And another great example is, of course, the school, building the school at the same time you build a reservoir. I've seen examples of parks, public parks in cities being a more acceptable way than just building a reservoir of water. We put the two together, then of course the community is going to buy into it a lot better.
Exactly. Yeah, there's so many, it's really presenting us, like getting to net zero is presenting us with an amazing challenge, and human beings are really great at that, and communities kind of know the problems they have that they're facing, and they are the experts when it comes to adapting within their communities. They know their problems, they have ideas for solutions. So yeah, how do we connect and in solidarity help them adapt?
Thank you, Zach. Let me now turn to Ambassador Fanti. We've seen from the film, of course, that the development of the Indian Ocean archipelago of Zanzibar, where both Pemba and Kokota are situated, is affected by climate change, and that affects, of course, every part of their living: the agriculture, the fishing, the tourism, of course, and as temperatures rise. I wanted to ask you what more is the European Union. The European Union, we know, supported this particular project, but I'm sure we're doing much more in the area in supporting Tanzania to combat climate change.
Thank you, Mercedes. Yes, first of all, as we can see very clearly from this very beautiful film, there are communities here in this country and in many other countries of the region who live already in quite precarious conditions. They have a very simple life and they're very dependent on nature for their survival. So what is absolutely important is try to help them in adapt to events that can very easily change completely towards worsening the quality of their life. Now, in the case specifically of Kokota, the intervention was made thanks to a European Union program, which is called the Global Climate Change Alliance, which has been working in many countries, and particularly in Tanzania as well, where it has spent around 10 million euros trying to help these communities to adapt to the consequences of climate change. And we see that after all, with relatively simple operations, it is possible to change the pattern, to change what is happening there. And this is exactly what we are also trying to do in Tanzania, also in other places. First of all, with regard to the agricultural sector, what is very important is to provide the farmers, especially the small farmers, with drought-resistant seeds, and also to help them in adapting the kind of production that they have to the new climate conditions, and also even small things like kitchen gardens, for instance. With regard to the fishermen, the same issue is a matter of helping them in changing certain habits, certain ways of managing their environment. For instance, if you take the mangrove is an essential plant that is present everywhere in Tanzania, in the ocean, and which has a key role in the preservation of the fish, in the preservation of the environment, and the fight against the erosion of the coast. So the fact of explaining how to manage mangrove forest and how to avoid just a simple abuse of that by destroying the mangrove forest is also something that we have been doing. And the same with regard to the community of fishermen, the way you fish, something that in Europe, for instance, we have learned already a long time ago, but here is relatively new, that you should not fish during certain time in certain areas in order to enable the stock of fish to be rebuilt. And this is also something which is helping very much, and that we are doing, for instance, for octopus, which is something, a kind of animal which is very much fished here. And finally, tourism, of course. Mass tourism is a threat to the environment. So what is necessary to do is to make a tourism which is more sustainable, both speaking to entrepreneurs, to the local authorities, and clearly also trying to educate the tourist, and also to offer different alternatives to tourism, such as cultural tourism, rehabilitating places. So as you see, many different interventions that can be relatively small, but can make a big difference.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Fanti. And I'm going to now turn to Celeste, who joins us from another ocean, the Pacific Ocean from Hawaii. Hawaii has set itself very ambitious goals in relation with climate change, to be climate neutral by 2045. And to generate 100% of its electricity from clean and renewable sources. So I'd like to know how you're working towards these goals, but also how you're cooperating with other islands, of course, because you have a lot of experience in dealing with this, and a lot of other islands could benefit from it. Thank you.
Yeah, aloha, Mercedes. It's such a pleasure to be here with you and with the ambassador, and just congratulations to Zach and the team for such an incredible film. So powerful, you know, for the first part of the film, The Call to Prayer, I recalled myself as a former diplomat serving in Saudi Arabia, that incredible cultural component that you're bringing to this conversation, and then the film, how it was presented, and really demonstrating that it's not mutually exclusive, conservation and economic development. And this is a particularly timely conversation as a global community. We're grappling with COVID, and it's hitting island economies hardest, actually. And so Hawaii, we're in that mix. We're both a major economy, but we're the most isolated, populated landmass. And so much of what was shared in the film and what Ambassador Fanti shared as well is relevant to Hawaii. We went from having some of the lowest unemployment rates to some of the highest practically overnight because of the disruption to our tourism economy. But the bright spots, as we talk about them, are the political will and the commitment. And what is presented here, and what I think is critically important, both as somebody who grew up on an island and then spent many years overseas working abroad, is that it's one of pioneering solutions, one of leadership, one that we now have a lot of discussion around a circular economy. The world has woken up to the need to have circular economy solutions and finite resources. And this is a reality that island economies and islanders have been living with their entire lives. So in Hawaii, we're very proud that we have the 100% clean energy commitment, and we were the first state in the United States to declare a 100% clean energy commitment, which was then subsequently announced in California and other larger states. And we were also the first state to sign on to the Paris Agreement by statute. And so these political commitments are then supported by a deep community engagement and business sector engagement as well. So Hawaii did set these goals, but we also have a set of sustainability goals that actually predate the UN SDGs. It's called the Aloha Plus Challenge. And so our goals cut across energy, food, natural resource management, water, waste, smart sustainable communities, and green workforce and education. So I'd like to share just a couple of thoughts about the film too, on how that connects to what we're doing. It's the cultural component. In Hawaii, the Aloha Plus Challenge, as I mentioned, our statewide framework for sustainability, is premised on Hawaiian indigenous knowledge and wisdom, which actually dates back 1,000 years. And I saw somebody comment in the chat, what was the cultural context or the indigenous community context in Kokota? And I'm curious to know that as well. And in so doing, there were systems that were put in place that prior to European contact in Hawaii, you had over 1 million people that were prospering through sustainable resource management. And that this inherent knowledge that what you do in your upper watershed will affect, your coral, your reefs, and everything in between. So it's the economic, social component that are really playing out in islands. Tourism is another component of that, absolutely. And now we're shifting to a more sustainable tourism economy, regenerative tourism. And you'll see that in the new strategic plan that our Hawaii Tourism Authority just released. I would look forward, I could share more, but I think those are the key areas. I would say that it's islands inspiring other islands. One thing that we have seen is that our own initiative was inspired by Micronesia Challenge, which inspired the Caribbean Challenge. And then we had the Aloha Plus Challenge because of our indigenously focused approach, we were now recognized by the United Nations as a local 2030 hub for sustainability solutions. And we were asked now to work with other island economies to scale island models to achieve the UN SDGs by 2017. And we were very delighted just last week to announce the first ever comprehensive statewide voluntary local review to achieve the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals in the United States. And that was launched during the UN General Assembly in partnership with the Brookings Institution and the UN Foundation. So it's the embodiment of shared values. What Zach shared is it's shared values, how we can bring the business community, the stakeholders collectively together to find out what matters to the community.
Thank you so much, Celeste, for sharing that and for reminding us that the circular economy was not invented when the European Union had its first strategy about it. Certainly not, but it's great to know how it operates also in Hawaii and how much the traditional knowledge can actually contribute to solutions as well. Zach, do you want to come in briefly on that point of cultural awareness and sort of cultural wisdom about these issues?
Sure, yeah. I mean, the Zanzibar archipelago has an incredible history, as does the region. You know, it's known as a spice island, and you know, it's thousands of years of history, and you know, the Swahili culture is born of Zanzibar. It is such a rich and diverse place. And you know, to your point on traditional knowledge, I think those agroforestry systems, like that kind of mixed agriculture, much more knowledge on fishing grounds and stuff like that was certainly present. And then, you know, there's a bit of an instance where people come and introduce new ways of doing things and impress that on communities. And, you know, not only was it the seed of the spice trade, but also the slave trade. So there's a huge, you know, development and colonial push that happened there that is also sort of prevalent today, and something that we're very aware of as we work through development. And that's something we're all very aware of, I think. But yeah, and to Celeste's point too around economics, and to push that a little bit further, and for the ambassador as well, like we're currently working with the European Union again on scaling a lot of these solutions. And they do involve economics, and they do involve like bringing farmers, smallholder farmers together around, you know, in regenerative farming to produce, you know, really incredible products that can then be, you know, brought to the export market, especially spice. So, you know, these things continue to build and get bigger. And when we find something that works, you know, that's when we can like scale it and bring it to an entire regional context. And that's something that I'm very, very excited to be working with the EU on right now.
Thank you, Zach. And that's a great introduction from what was my next question to Ambassador Fanti, indeed, which is about that trade aspect and economic incentives for the marketability and sustainability standards. I'm aware that the European Union has a program that is furthering that very focus. So Ambassador, if you can tell us a bit more about it.
Yes, certainly, with pleasure. Well, the point is precisely what has been mentioned, how to make agricultural production more sustainable and more in line with environmental standards. So the work that we are doing here in Tanzania in the framework of the EU Cooperation Development Programs is precisely to assist the farmers in order to meet certain quality and environmental standards. For instance, to adhere to accept the voluntary sustainable standards in their production, and also in general, all kinds of quality standards that can be applied and can make their production more sustainable, and also to on the difficult markets like the European market, which is today asking increasingly for bioproducts, organic productions, environmental compatible foods. So we have a big program which is called AgriConnect, which is working in various sectors of the value chain of agricultural production. Its total amount is 100 million euros. And it is concentrating with regard to agricultural production on coffee, tea, and horticultural value chains. But we have also other programs that are concentrating on spices, for instance, on tea. All productions which are of essential importance for the country. And a lot of efforts are put precisely into these acceptance of international standards of quality. So there are components of our programs which are specifically targeting that in cooperation with the authorities and with the farmers. So all that is on the one hand to better protect the environment, on the other hand to provide better economic opportunities to the farmers with a special attention to the small farmer. Thank you.
Thank you. And that also brings me to the next question I had for Celeste, which is, you mentioned before you're working also with business in Hawaii through the Hawaii Sustainability Business Program. And that is, of course, part of bringing the community together and making it also a better standard of living for all of you. So you could tell us a little bit more about that and what other islands could learn from your experience.
Yeah, thank you, Mercedes, and thank you also to Ambassador Fanti for the investment that the EU is making in these communities to support this green growth and green economy work. And absolutely, businesses play a critical role, and that we find that the best solutions are in between the community and the private sector and civil society and government, and that is why 3 years ago, we launched the Sustainability Business Forum in Hawaii. And these are actually 24 CEOs. So it's a CEO forum that meets quarterly, and they have committed to the SDGs and to the Aloha Plus Challenge and to triple bottom line outcomes. And specifically 2 things. It's to facilitate a dialogue of CEOs that come from very different actual businesses that are banking sector, utilities, land asset managers, and but they're all connected because they're living in an island context. And these are publicly traded companies that actually care about what BlackRock and other major investors think about what they're doing. But it's important to understand the island context, because if you're managing a utility, you're concerned about what your infrastructure is and the impact of climate-related severe weather events, whether it's a catastrophic natural disaster, a Category 5 hurricane, or a wildfire, which is really affecting our island communities. So these CEOs have come together, they've shown leadership to have a dialogue and to support concrete action. And through this forum, they've looked at pioneering a carbon offset program that would actually align with market-based mechanisms to support this effort. They're also supporting a sustainable tourism approach, but this is what is interesting. They've also committed to sharing their progress on the online dashboard that Hawaii Green Growth manages. So all of the data on their commitments to energy efficiency, and this is actually contributing to their commitment to ESG. And we've seen that the environment, social governance, which is now sort of also SASB and TCFD, these are things that publicly traded companies around the world are needing to report on. And what they've found are companies is that this is, again, this is shared value across shareholder, stakeholder, and actually the investors. And I'm delighted to see that one of our major companies, Hawaiian Electric Industries, just 2 weeks ago released their first ESG report. And so in the island context, this business forum is particularly interesting to me because it actually does show how these businesses are serving as anchor institutions. And Mercedes, that's usually a term that is reserved for public, like a university or hospital. But in Hawaii, and I would imagine in island economies more broadly, we're seeing businesses serve as anchor institutions that are contributing to the community, particularly against the backdrop of COVID. And they're looking for opportunities to support a transition to a more equitable and resilient economic recovery post-COVID.
Thank you, Celeste. And indeed, I mean, that's a very, very important point. And I'm delighted that it's working in Hawaii, which proves that it can work also in other contexts. And the whole issue of transparency of in reporting, not just about financial returns, but also about how your business is contributing to the community, whether it's from an environmental or social point of view. I agree with you, it's going to become crucially important in this whole conversation. My last sort of prepared question is for Zach, to ask him, you know, we have a few in the audience that are aspiring filmmakers. I circulated the invitation to some students of filmmaking, and I wanted to ask, you talked a little bit about it at the beginning. What is the film? What are the films that we need now when talking about climate change? Certainly your film was needed 4 years ago to start talking about hope, talking about solutions that actually work. What do you think we need now?
Well, I think one of the most important things we can do, and it's in a filmmaking context and also in a social context, is just to keep talking about climate change and to keep talking about solutions and keep talking about the issues and just really bringing it to the forefront. Like we need that more than ever to keep this conversation going. You know, I think regional context is really important too. Like climate change is such a huge issue. And sometimes people feel like it's hard to have entry points into how to work on it. Like I'm in Canada right now. We're also doing a series on how our forests, our Acadian forest, which is endangered and is very, very heavily cut and managed intensively. How is our forest changing and things that we can do? So I think that, you know, there's a million communities out there working on these problems. And so telling those stories, I think, is really helpful, not only to inspire people, but to let people know, like, how does this affect me? How is this going to affect me in my life? Because it certainly is. And as far as like making films, you know, I've learned through working with my colleagues and you know, some filmmakers, that it really is about people. You know, like people love people stories and like finding and you know, really charismatic and incredible people who are doing something big, who are really trying to do something. They're out there and getting involved, because, you know, I only came to make this film, or in part make this film, through being involved in this work intimately. And, you know, then you're embedded in the story in a way where you have the trust, and you can build those stories and tell them in a way that works and doesn't just seem like it's tacked on. So, you know, I think there's lots of tips and tricks to making film, but I would encourage people you also don't have to make a film. You can start in other ways by, you know, and just some video and sharing things, and it doesn't have to be a mountain. Every journey starts with a step. So.
And thank you also for sharing the link to the film in the chat. It's a YouTube link, so anybody can see it again and also share it if you've liked the film, as I think we all did. Please share it with your friends, and so that they can learn about this story again. We will circulate it to everybody that is inscribed in the film, so that it's available to all. There's been a couple of very relevant questions in the chat about what's the situation now in Kokota, in the wider archipelago. So did the project actually endure? And also, what was the traditional situation in Kokota before? Was it traditionally a forest-covered island? Perhaps the ambassador and I don't know if Zach is aware of the situation right now.
Sure.
Well, I confess I've not been personally visiting Kokota, but we have a monitoring system to see that the work that we do in the villages remains durable. And therefore, in Kokota, I understand that the situation has been sustained by the population, and that they've been able to manage to continue the work that had been started at the time of the film, when we have seen what they had achieved.
Yeah, it's very true, and one of the things that, I mean, Kokota is really wonderful, because it was a story of literally having no water, no energy, and through this intervention, which was just one of 32 villages that the projects supported through the EU were actually working with during this time. It was just, we wanted to focus on that one story. But Kokota, I was back about a year ago to Kokota Islet, and it's doing incredible. There's because of the film, there is actually, this is a great spin-off of storytelling, more energy, people learned about it, and so to kind of add to the sustainability of the European Union's actions, Other funders had come to kind of like support. So there's now even better access to water, and people like you mentioned kitchen gardens, Manfredo, and it's one of the programs that we were doing on the island of Kokota. And now every household has this lush kitchen garden, and it almost brought me to tears, because this is a place a few years ago where people would never pour water on the ground. That would just be insane. They would never do that. But now they're watering their crops, and they have this ability to grow their own food instead of sailing for 15 hours return trip. And so Kokota is doing better than ever, which is wonderful. And the projects, as I mentioned, in Zanzibar and taking these lessons are expanding through the European Union's AgriConnect program. So, it is a really good news story, and we're happy to continue to work and do as good as we can to bring these solutions, and then to share them outward also with other communities and other islands. Celeste.
Thank you. I've seen another question, Celeste, perhaps to you. You've shared a lot of positive stories already from Hawaii, but saying that it's so important to share these positive stories to inspire others. So I don't know if you have any more examples of good action that leads to positive results in an effective way.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I just want to also say what Zach is saying about storytelling is so important. How we communicate this message, the urgency of climate change, but to do it in a way that's actually solution driven. And this is where I think islands are so well situated, because there's also a history of storytelling in the community. And, I have the honor of sitting on the Global Island Partnership Board. And so really our work, while we are a hub in Hawaii, and some of the solutions are obviously going to be grounded in my place, it's really looking at those connections and shared challenges and opportunities across all islands. So can't wait to go to Kokota. If I'm invited, I will certainly take that opportunity.
Please come.
And you've sold me. I'm there as soon as we're able to. We have quarantine right now in Hawaii, but one example, and this is really exciting, our colleagues Kua, which actually means backbone of a fish, and they are themselves a backbone organization that are working with communities in the fish ponds to restore the ancient Hawaiian fish ponds, which were so vibrant, was supporting the economy, food security, also the environment. And now we've seen, when Hawaii hosted the IUCN World Conservation Congress, how different communities around the world are looking at fish pond restoration. And in addition to the actual fish pond restoration, how that's married with the commitment to a 30% nearshore marine management goal by 2030, and then what the legal implications are of that through the community-based subsistence fishing program. And that's where you actually have this agreement that the state is co-managing these resources with the community. So that's just one very specific example, and I'm sure in Hawaii's local and cultural context. And so that's what we're always very mindful of. What is the local and cultural context here? What are some of the things that are similar? What are some things that are different? And then how can we rapidly scale the solutions? Because I sit here in a major economy, but in the middle of the Pacific. And so this is where partnering with the EU is really helpful, I think, Zach, what you've managed to do, because it's that islands can have a major economy impact. If we can more quickly scale these island-led solutions, they can be applicable to larger economies. And that's where you're going to have the transformational change we need across every sector of society within the next 10 years to avoid the most catastrophic impacts of climate change. But it starts with a story, and it starts with the community.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Celeste. That's so true. And that's why we really enjoyed this film and being able to share it with others as well. I don't know if there's any, still have a couple of minutes. I don't know if there are other comments you'd like to add, any of the speakers or any of the, Ambassador Fanti, go ahead.
Yes, I would like to say a couple of things about that, because first of all, the issue is that the merit of this film is not only the fact that it's indeed a very nice film, but it explains in a very clear manner what can be done and what can be achieved. And this is very important, because very often when we speak about climate change, the effect of climate change, etc., it remains so theoretical, so abstract that the people do not necessarily realize what are the implications and what can be done. And I think we need more messages like that to show concrete examples of good practices. The other element, and this is a message, a narrative that we still have to strengthen a lot, is that fighting climate change and undertaking sustainable economy is not a cost. On the contrary, it opens economic possibilities, business opportunities, and employment opportunities. And this is something that is a message that I think we really need to repeat. And finally, one point, when we speak to our local interlocutors here in Africa, they usually tell us, okay, we are suffering about climate change, but the cause of climate change are you, developed countries, because emissions mainly come from you. And here, I think it's the right to underline the commitment of the European Union in the sector of reducing emissions and the very bold commitments that have been taken very recently by the European Commission and by the European Union. And this is something very, very positive signal, I would say.
Thank you, and absolutely, the main message that we're trying to communicate anybody that's working for the European Union at the moment is that we can actually recover from the big economic crisis brought upon us by COVID through actually bringing back an economy that will work both based on green recovery and also digital transformation. And that's how we build collectively our future that will both allow us to be more resilient against climate change, but also to prosper and to continue to provide for the communities as well. Perhaps Zach and Celeste, if you have any final comments on your side.
From my side, I don't. I noticed that Mbaruk is in here, and you know, some of our team in Tanzania. So I just wanted to say hello to them. I know that they're excited about this conversation, and yeah, just to extend to the ambassador and Celeste and yourself, Mercedes, whenever you'd like, we'd love to host you in Pemba as soon as we can move around again.
I'll certainly love to be back in Tanzania, and I did visit Zanzibar, but not Pemba and Kokota, so I'm all for it. Thank you. Celeste.
Mercedes, I would just congratulate again Zach and the EU for the incredible work and the way you're communicating it, and the opportunity to be with you today to share best practices. And I want to congratulate the team, as Zach said, who's on the call, that is actually the individuals on the ground who are making that change, and how it's really needs to be a community-driven process for us to achieve our really ambitious goals, right? But I do want to just leave folks with a thought that what is exciting about this panel and this work is that we are collectively, as islands, sharing an island worldview with the rest of the world. And that's, as we see our planet in the sea of space, we're aware of the finite resources, and an island worldview can actually help pioneer a recovery from the place we're currently at. So I just want to say thank you and aloha, and we look forward to working together.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you all for this super interesting conversation today, and that I'm sure will continue. And as I said, we'll share the link to the film with everybody that inscribed for the event today, and we'll continue to share the wonderful story it tells. Thanks again, and goodbye for now.
For including me. Yeah, it was wonderful chatting with all of you.
Goodbye, colleagues, and thank you very much for organizing this panel. Thank you very much.
Congratulations
again for the movie.
Thank you.